Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexandra Weiland, part of the Shift team here. I know I'm a few minutes early, so we'll give everybody a few more minutes to hop on, and we will officially get going at exactly 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So welcome, everybody. Looking forward to this. All right, just about a minute more and we'll officially get going. For all of you who have already hopped on, thank you so much. Hope you're as excited as I am to talk about time management. All right, it's officially 11, which means we're officially beginning. Again, welcome if you're just hopping on now. My name is Alexandra Weiland, and I'm the Director of Consulting Operations here at Shift. And today I am here to discuss with you time management, the Skill Builder Bootcamp. So just a couple of pointers as you listen along today. First, this will all be recorded and shared back with you at the end of the session. So if you have to step away for a second and hop back on, just know that we will give you these resources that we discuss. And we want this to be really interactive. So what I mean is there's two options to interact with us during this webinar. One is to actually submit a question, or two, engage on the chat. And the difference between those two is questions are private, chat is public, but you have those options once you log in and see screen. So throughout the day, I'll be posing some questions along the way. There's a few polls involved, and you'll all get to see your responses in real time. But we really want this to be as engaging for you as it can be. And again, just thank you for joining. So without further ado, time management. First, I want to share a quick personal story, which is for many of you on the call, you probably don't personally know me, but I am an expectant parent and a full-time professional. So I'm welcoming my first baby to the world come August, unless she comes early. And what I'm quickly learning is time is not equal. And this really showed up for me on a recent trip I took, and of course used Uber to get to and from the airport. And my driver shared with me that there's this idea of the surge. So for any of you who have used Uber or Lyft before, maybe you know about this already, but I found it fascinating when the driver told me more about what the surge even meant. And so what he described was, say, for example, there's a popular day in your town. And so I'm from Annapolis, so the Naval Academy is right there. And there's that moment when all the midshipmen get to leave campus and get to be themselves and wear civilian clothing. And it was spring break at the time. So this driver explained that the demand and time of day makes everything different in terms of the pricing. That's the surge. And so what's really cool for a driver is that no matter what, when somebody steps foot into the car, before he hits the gas, he's already getting paid something. And so to take somebody on a 5-minute drive, boom, he instantly makes like $50. But usually when the surge isn't occurring, that same trip, it would take multiple 5, 10 trips like it in order to earn the same amount. So I come to you with that example of just, again, time is not equal. And it got me thinking, how we view it, how we use it. And to go full circle, knowing that my life's really about to change and I'll need to adapt my time differently, it makes me wonder, will I truly have less time? Or will my time be more valuable? Or is it really about the available time that I will choose to have or create or just will be there for me? Is it just going to be, in fact, more precious? So with that, here's what you can expect to learn on the webinar today. It's broken out into 5 pieces, and the first is time management myths and new truths that set you free. The second is we'll go into techniques to help you sort priorities and set deadlines, something that's a part of all of our lives. You also get access to tools to overcome time barriers and boost your personal productivity. I'll share with you 6 best practices. We're calling them hacks. And these are to maximize your time without sacrificing quality. And last but not least, I'll discuss with you how to design a schedule that establishes the work-life integration we all seek. But first, a little humor. I love this. So whether you believe multitasking is efficient or not, have you fallen prey to this person right here and thought, you know what, it's actually better to hold off on everything than start something? Or maybe you're these two, where you thought, oh my goodness, what did I forget today? Shoot, I'm late for something. And my question back to you is, well, what's the reason for the lateness? What's the reason for your forgetfulness? What might be the cause? So, what's trending? You can see that Apple Watch there, and it's just a reminder that the clock resets for all of us after 24 hours. And no one has found that 25th hour, that 30th hour. We all get the same 24. But how we perceive time, how we fill it up, and also how we waste it, that's where the true opportunity lies. So first, a poll. We're going to open it right now. Take a minute and respond yourself. You have about 20 seconds. And what we're after is, how much time does the average worker spend on their work email each week? Is it less than 10%, somewhere between 11 and 30, 31 to 50, or more than half the day? I'll give you a couple more seconds to respond. Give it a quick thought. All right, so you should be able to see the poll results on your screens. For anyone who picked B, you were right. The average worker spends 28% of their work week on email. Tally that up, that's more than 11 hours of the work week. Wow. So just to put that in a little perspective, if you wanted to draw that out over the course of the year and you were consistently getting the same amount of emails, spending the same amount of time, after 365 days, that's equivalent to, take your pick, climbing Mount Everest more than 4 times or flying around the world over 30 times. I don't know about you, but I would much rather be spending my time differently than just glued to my inbox, whether it's with family or doing something I love. So just some food for thought there. All right, coming at you with another stat, 72 hours. Say goodbye to the 40-hour work week. And some of you on the phone, I can't hear you, but I have to imagine you're chuckling and saying, of course, I don't just spend 40 hours on my work each week. This was pulled from a study done last year that HBR covered. Covey Center for Leadership put it out. They interviewed more than 400 executives, business owners, and entrepreneurs. And they were focused on the emerging length of our American work week, which is just steadily increasing. Yikes. Now let's dive a little deeper into interruptions. It could be work email, it could be something else, but here's what we're finding out. Every 8 minutes, we get interrupted. So while that's 50 interruptions a day, if you chunk that down to an hour, that's roughly 7 times you're getting interrupted. Talk about having trouble changing your focus and then getting back to the task at hand. Then if you go to the middle of the screen, 50% of your workday, you can count on losing 5 minutes of your time per interruption. And here's bad news. Not everything you're being interrupted for is actually important. So last but not least, on the far right, of those interruptions, if you asked folks, nearly 80% are saying that little or no value are those interruptions. So to boil it down, in a given workday, we could be losing as much as 3 hours of our life. Again, just to go back to my life for a second, which is I'm very, very pregnant and expecting my first, it's jarring to me when I think about how we're going to spend time as a family, how to juggle the work and the life. And so I'm scouring parental websites these days and the books, trying to figure out, are there any extra time-saving tips and advice that I should be wary of or aware of? And here were my 2 favorites on parents.com. One, it suggested use the internet. I'm like, okay, I use the internet every day, but you be more specific. So reading further, one of the hacks was automate your billing. And I thought, well, yeah, I do that a lot, but there's probably still some subscriptions that I'm a part of, and I could cut my time down if I automated that. The other thing is make extras. So for all of you good folks out there that find the time and choose to spend it in your kitchens, if you're going through the effort of chopping all the ingredients and sauteing and baking, make sure you make extra, double, triple, and use your freezer to your advantage. Now on to those time myths. So this is about the stories we tell ourselves. How many of you have fallen victim to perhaps one of these phrases? Being busy is a badge of honor. I can tell you right now, that's one that I believed wholeheartedly for far too long, and it certainly got me into some trouble. I don't have enough time. Well, I shared with you earlier, we all get the same 24 hours, but I know, at least I've personally experienced, where I've just found myself thinking that. I've certainly heard it in meetings, in conversations at family functions, what have you. If I say no, then I'm not a team player. That's a big one. You know, we're in the world of business. We interact with humans. We depend on others for a paycheck. We, look for and require services to help run our lives. So saying no sometimes feels like no option or like we're not in it. Everything is a priority. That's, to me, is when we say those things to ourselves, we are either overwhelmed or ill-equipped. And so that's a big part of the purpose of this webinar, to equip you so that nothing totally feels like it's everything. And last but not least, do you ever tell yourself that time management really is the big issue here? I'm here to say maybe it's not. Yes, we're talking about time management throughout the webinar, but said a different way, to me, it's really attention and energy management. And for any of you who joined the last webinar I led on self-awareness, this will really come out. So it's either about us not being present and attentive, i.e. we're distracted, or we might find that prioritizing is difficult because we don't know where to begin, or perhaps we lack routine. So all of that kind of bubbles up to attention and energy management being the true issue here. So how to combat these myths? Here are the 6 hacks I'm going to share with you. And just to break them down a little bit more, the first 3 are more strategic. So that means there's a greater level of effort and energy that you would need to expend, and it might take longer to see those effects. Whereas the bottom 3, 4 through 6, those are more tactical. You might feel some immediate relief or just see improvement very quickly. But my encouragement to you is, because these were all borrowed from great minds, and I've tried them all, experiment, but be consistent with your experimentation. So it's not enough to try one day and then flip to the next and flip to the next. If you know anything about habits, it really takes anywhere from 2 weeks, 3 weeks, somewhere in those environs before something really sticks with us. So hang in there. All right. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. I love that. That quote is by Greg McCune. He's the author of Essentialism. And we're going to talk more about his book. Not all of it, some of it, but if you haven't read it before, I highly recommend it. It's a New York Times bestseller, and I'll share more with you in a minute about him. But first, another poll, our favorite. So, read through each of these statements and then select the one that best describes you. So A, I often wonder how I can fit it all in. Or B, I tend to say yes without thinking. C, I'm not always certain the right things are getting done. So again, we'll keep the poll open for a little bit here so you all have a chance to respond, and then we'll move on. Another couple seconds. So which one best describes you? I can fit it all in. I tend to say yes without thinking. Not sure if the right things are getting accomplished. All right. So all of you had to respond because we only gave you 3 choices, unless you chose not to participate at all. But here's the news. If you did say something, if you did select one of these, then that means that at some point you're operating in what Greg would call a non-essentialist mindset. And so what do I mean by that? All right, there's a lot on this page here. So I want you to devote your eyes to the left first. And just notice that there's all this scribble here, and then there's this circle. And so what this is referring to is not only the cover of his book, but it's really about where we're channeling our energy and our focus. So we have the opportunity to either go in a lot of different directions and try to fire in all these cylinders and try to do all these things, or we could be thinking about highest and best use of our time and really funneling and channeling that energy and focus to do what's most important, aka the circle that's surrounding essentialism. And so Greg goes on to describe the differences between being non-essential and essential, and he breaks it down into these 3 parts: how we think, what we do, and what we get. And so as we look through these 2 columns, starting with non-essentialists, just the top bar here, the thinking piece, to them, they are all things to all people. They say things like, I have to, it's all important. They question, how can I possibly fit this all in? Whereas an essentialist thinks very differently. They believe that less is better. I choose to, only things that really matter. And they consider trade-offs. So if I boiled that down, to me, that first bar is really representing restriction or freedom. And then the do piece, that part in the middle, are we operating in this idea that we're undisciplined and we're pursuing all these things more and more and more, saying yes without thinking, trying to force execution at the last moment? Or are you more of the being where I believe that less is better, I can discern what really matters, and I say no more than I say yes? I'm highly selective. We boil that down to quality versus quantity. And then this final bucket here, so depending on the kind of mindset you embody, this is what you can expect to get in return. So on the left, taking on too much and the work will suffer and we feel out of control, versus living a life that matters because we are in control, the right things are getting done, and we're experiencing joy during that journey. So if we wanted to juxtapose that one more time, do we live in constant stress and disappointment, or are we finding calm and fulfillment? And that's just something to pose back to yourself and reflect on how you're operating currently or others around you are. And last but not least, this is a call out for a lander that we've created that you will have access to after the webinar today. So I mentioned we have a lot of assets, including the recording of this webinar, but here specifically is a deep dive on Greg McKeown's book. So if any of what I just shared with you is resonating and you want to learn more, definitely check out shiftthework.com/essentialism, and there's so much more in there. I'll also describe a little bit more of what to expect on that landing page towards the end of this webinar. So finally, hack number 1, a way to actually optimize your time. We're calling this eliminate non-essentials. And it's meaty. Remember, it's part of the strategic hacks. And it's meaty because it's covering a lot of ground. So Greg's book is divided into 4 parts. One is about the essence, which is the core mindset of essentialism. Explore are the next few chapters that focus on discerning trivial from the non-trivial. And then eliminate, which is this hack's devotion to, is all about removing all that's trivial. And finally, execute is getting rid of obstacles to do things flawlessly. So because we already established an urgency and a need to improve how we spend our time, this first hack is focused just on removing what is trivial, non-essential. So if you're up for the challenge, here's how to do it. Focusing on the bold at the top here first. So how to? First, you have to clarify your essential intent. Then there's the chance and the desire that you need to dare to say no. Uncommit by cutting your losses, edit by showing restraint, and limit with boundaries. So what do all those things mean? Let's start with the first, clarifying your essential intent. This is all about a big decision. So think of one in your life, and I'll offer an example. When I was picking a college, I had a lot of different options to choose from, right? There's many colleges and universities here in the country. I'd already boiled it down. I wanted to be in the States. But as I was looking, I started to refine my search, and I thought, well, it's got to be a certain size school. I want it to be on the East Coast where I'm from. I want there to be certain course offerings. I want to be able to play D3 sports and still have the chance to pursue other interests. I wanted that well-rounded, what I believe to be the quintessential college experience. So the defining factor of essential intent, it is the one decision that eliminates 1,000 later ones. Key words here, one and later. So by me choosing one college and not trying to go to bunches of colleges, I was essentially boiling down my opportunities to be really focused so that any other opportunity on some other campus, that didn't affect me. Now let's dive into what we mean by dare to choose now. So this is really about being okay with being socially awkward. Back to, when we feel like we're not being a team player, that's where this comes in. So for me, I thought about when I first got to Shift and I was in a project management role as an associate here. My prime responsibilities were everything from managing timelines to creating lots of deliverables, proofing plenty of documents, and poring over data. And it was very common that a request would come through on Slack to say, hey, can you put eyes on this? I need it by a certain time. I need the help. So whenever these requests would come through, I had a decision to make. Do I be the team player because that's what I think is required and I have to automatically say yes? Do I ignore it and just let that person go find someone else? Well, I'd already seen the notification, so it was on my mind. It had interrupted the day. Or do I respond a third way? And that's when the no repertoire here at the bottom of the screen really comes in handy. So this is a piece of Greg's book where he calls out all the ways you can eloquently say no. The first is the awkward pause. And that's really for you as the recipient of the request to decide and take a breath before you accept, decline. The soft no, that's a little bit different. That's all about, I'd love to, but I can't right now because. I know but. 3, let me check my calendar. That actually shows folks that you aren't going to just willy-nilly accept what is being asked. You're actually going to hold yourself accountable to your own schedule that you have. 4, email bounce back. I love this one. So how come we only reserve auto reply for vacations and holidays? You know, there are all kinds of different size projects for different lengths, different deadlines. Can't you build in some of the day uninterrupted and indicate to others, I will get back to you, however, right now? So it's just something to consider. And maybe you're in an environment where that freedom isn't there for you, but maybe it is, and you just haven't tried it. 5, yes, what should I deprioritize? That's really flipping the question back to that other person. It really helps when you share with them what else is on your plate, and they can be an active thinker with you about what gets shuffled. 6, humor, always a safe bet you can try. Someone says, hey, can I get your help with this? Say, nope. And then I would add a little bit of color so that they're just not left wondering. 7, you're welcome to X, I'm willing to Y. So the example in Greg's book is, you're welcome to borrow my car. I'll make sure the keys are here for you. You're essentially telling them that you won't be their driver, but you're still helping somewhat. And then last but not least, I can't, but X might be interested. And I would caution you on that one, because if you have a track record of always suggesting that someone else be the person that solves for the request, well, that someone else might get a little perturbed. But if it's well within the bounds and it's actually their expertise and you are best suited to be doing something else right now, that's a really fair way to duck out of the request. So those are some extra suggestions and ideas of how to say no if you're courageous enough. The last thing I'll share with you is this limit with boundaries. So this was another big learning for me. Greg describes it as, don't rob people of their problems. Put up a fence so they solve it for themselves. It essentially boils down to 1, determine deal breakers, and 2, craft social contracts. So for me, I had to unlearn that working early mornings and late nights consistently weren't the best thing for me. And I credit my husband, who saw me running into walls and blowing past my own self-imposed deadlines when I said, hey, I'll be up at 7 a.m. I'm going to go take my shower. I'm going to hit the road. And then it would be 7:10 and 7:15 and 7:35. And so it was really helpful when he shared with me what he was experiencing. And it took that witness in order for me to change the way I was doing things. I had to create a healthy barrier. I realized how helpful that was to decide, here's when I will check my email, here's when I won't. And then because I was thinking about the day differently, it was allowing me to tap into my optimal time for when I was clearest and could do the tasks that mattered most. So I know that was a lot. Some of these other slides will run much faster. But speaking of optimal time, are you a lark, an owl, or a third bird? Very technical term here. These are pulled out from Dan Pink's book, When. And so if you haven't read it, highly encourage that read as well. It talks all about time. And basically what Dan is telling us is that we all experience a peak and a trough and a rebound in our given day. It syncs to our biorhythms, our energy, our ability to be vigilant. But when this happens for each person differs depending on what kind of bird you are. And so what do I mean by that? Well, take a look at this graph. On the left axis is percentage of population, and on the bottom, midpoint of sleep. So I'll use me as the example. I like to go to bed somewhere between 10 and 11. That's when my brain starts to naturally shut down. That's what works. And now luckily, the body has really regulated to around 7 hours of sleep. So given that if I go to bed at 10, my midpoint for sleep would be 1:30-ish or so. So I fall somewhere in this realm. I'm considered what is the early bird because I'm not getting up until 6. But we're focused on what's your midpoint of sleep from the time you go to bed to the time you wake up. And you can see that these other two buckets are the other types of birds. So think for a minute. What's your midpoint? Now, hack number 2 is all about identifying that optimal time frame. And just a quick stat for you. Only 27% of U.S. adults get the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's according to the National Sleep Foundation, and it was highlighted in an interview with Ariana Huffington, author of The Sleep Revolution, last year on TV. She's a huge proponent that, yes, we need to be consistent about when we go to bed and when we wake up, which I know that's ideal state. But the other thing that's much more in control is how soon do you put down that phone that emits blue light to when you go to bed, because that can really mess with us. So, ideal timing. How do you do this? One, just determine your sleep midpoint. And I just gave you the example of my own sleep pattern. So find out what yours is. Then take an assessment of the kinds of tasks you do or need to do. It's pretty fair to say that we all have tasks that are analytic, insightful, or creative. We all have the chance to make impressions, meaning we're meeting new folks, we're engaging in different kinds of conversations. And on average, we make 35,000 conscious choices a day. So that right there is sort of a boiled down version of anything that probably would be on your plate in a given day. But now it's about, so when do I do these things? Honor your inner bird. So for any early birds out there with me, we should be doing our most energy intensive work, the analytical work, when we are most vigilant, when we're at our peak, which happens early in the day. When we do creative tasks, that should be reserved for late afternoon, early evening, kind of when we're coming out of the trough and going into the rebound. And that's important. So while it might seem counterintuitive to do creative work when maybe your brain feels a little depleted, it's really about having less inhibitions. And that's when the vigilance is low, but the possibilities are endless. What you don't see here are administrative tasks. And that's because they shouldn't take up most of your day. And yet so many of us, we let that happen. So think about administrative is wedged between certain moments, but it's not all consuming. Think about it as when I'm in my trough and I have a full belly from lunch, maybe that's the time to check in with email, do the quick things I need, and then hop back into what's truly important, what I intended to get accomplished. Okay. There's a little bonus for you. Implement more naps. This is something Dan fully believes. I believe it too. And I still have room for better in terms of this optimal timing. I've been the proponent of, take the 15-minute nap, or, it'd be nice to take a full hour if the day allowed for it. But he has cracked the code on the optimal amount of time you should spend and how you should go about it. So really quickly, number one, find your afternoon trough time. For me, it's around 3, 4 o'clock. And yes, if I'm at the office, I won't be taking a nap. But if I'm working remotely, maybe. 2, create that peaceful environment. So this is all about turning off anything that's going to ping, zing, notify, ring. The lovely thing about smartphones is they don't only have to go in airplane mode, but you can disconnect from Wi-Fi and then absolutely nothing gets to you. But the alarm still works. Then take in some caffeine. That might seem surprising to some of you. It says coffee here, green tea is another option, dark chocolate's another option. But notice what he says, the caffeine won't fully engage in your bloodstream for 25 minutes. That's when you set your timer. And then by then, it's going to take a few minutes to probably fall into that blissful state, but then you want to wake yourself up before you become groggy again. So it's that sweet spot of the 25-minute marker, and then back to the pail for routines. Repeat this consistently. I know we don't all have the luxury of just checking out somewhere in the middle of our afternoons or middle of the days. But again, if you find yourself not working optimally, I have to imagine that some of it might be tied to lacking sleep or doing different kinds of tasks at a time that's not best suited for your brain power. Put your calendar where your mouth is. We say this a lot here at Shift, and it's because we truly believe that if you put something on the books, well, that's an appointment with another person, or perhaps it's an appointment with yourself. So are you honoring it? This third hack, the last of the strategic hacks, is really about designing your life. What kind do you want to have? And sadly, you can see here, 67% of meetings are deemed unproductive. I'm wondering, have you ever sat in a room and wondered, why am I here right now? Or told yourself this is pointless? Or you got invited into something and you thought, that's not really meant for me, but you accepted it anyway. So how do you design your life? Well, first things first, what's important in and out of work? Start by first adjusting your Zoom. So are we talking you need to re-engineer your entire year? Is it just really about the next month before you? Or you really want to have a different cadence and feel to your week? Figuring out how far you want to accordion the focus is the first step. Then it's all about mapping what you want your essentials, when you want your essentials to occur. Another way to think about essentials here is what's non-negotiable for you. So these are sort of the basics of life, right? Sleeping, eating, exercise, family time, thinking time, creation time. I'll add another, your commute. I commute about an hour, roughly one direction. So I used to not build that into the calendar. And then I caught myself realizing, wow, from one meeting to a yoga class, I didn't allow enough time for traffic. Interesting. And just another hack on the eating front, there's so many wonderful companies out there that do the, here are the ingredients you need just for this recipe, or here's the already prepared food. For my family, that's really worked out well. And we do that on a regular cadence, and that has saved us a bunch of time and allowed more of it to just be about conversation and enjoying the meal. Third bullet here, pay attention to margins. So I use 2 hacks to keep me honest. One, now I set alarms 15 minutes before I need to be somewhere else. So if I'm at my desk at home and I meant to get in that shower by 7 a.m., that alarm's going off at 6:45 to lift me out of my focus state and say, it's time to get going. The other one is I put leave on my afternoon calendar. That might sound micromanagey. That might not be something you suffer from, but if you love what you do and you get very consumed quickly by it, like I do, it's a really helpful thing for me to have. All right, bullet number 4, schedule your fun self-care and vacations. So this screenshot here, I don't expect you to be able to really read it, but it's just proving to you that I went through the exercise of color coding and differentiating between different activities I wanted to make sure happened in my life. And I was inspired by a woman who's on an executive team of a $1 billion plus organization. And she was only one of 2 women in that group. But she shared with us that at the end of a year, before the next one hits and the ball drops, she would pour through her next year's calendar and book out her haircuts, her massages, her family vacations, the things that made her whole and made sure that she prioritized self-care, because when she pours into her cup, she can pour into others. 5th, build in all of your must meetings. So we all get invites for recurring meetings and we send them too. These are those monthly leadership sessions or your direct report one-on-ones, things like that. Make sure they stay on there. Those matter. It's all those other ad hoc stuff that we can't anticipate yet. But if these are accounted for, then it makes it easier to decide, is that an invitation I'm accepting or rejecting? And speaking of, this last bullet, commit to ensuring all new meetings support the life you want. So a quick trick there is if you are booking a meeting with someone and it's going to be an hour, that's the default in Outlook, maybe scale it back by 10 minutes so that it ends at the 50 mark and it gives you the appropriate buffer that if you're in flow, talk a little bit longer. And if it's more about, no, I really need to transition to the next thing, I need to grab a bio break, eat something, well, you've already built that in and it's a gift to everybody that you're ending early. So that wraps up the first 3 hacks. We're going to speed through some of these other ones to end you all on time. But first, a quick note, edit your life frequently and ruthlessly. It's your masterpiece after all, said Nathan Morris. So even though you'll experiment with some of these things or you do them now, there's also an argument to be made that sometimes you still need to go back to your own system and question if it's working for you. That's healthy. That's you being really self-aware. So here we go, workflow processing and organizing. Now we're getting into the tactical. And I share this with you. It's from David Allen, who's a productivity guru. He wrote the book, Getting Things Done. He's hired all around the world by busy professionals to help make sense of life. And I really gravitated towards his work when I was struggling to figure out a system that worked well for me, really to manage incoming messages, how to track files in progress, how to organize past work. And this was the depiction of what I was attempting to solve, but it made so much more sense when I saw this. So in the middle here, it's just about life's inputs, everything from conversations to notes to phone calls to those Post-its that just bombard our desks and so on. But the real question here is, what is it? Then it's deciding if it's actionable. And that's where it brings you down to, it's either yes, it is, or no, it's not. And then it's about, if we just take the yes pathway, what's the next action, or what's the desired outcome? Desired outcomes we reserve for things that we're planning out, literal projects with a set purpose, vision, goals, and roles. But if it's something that came at you from left field and you didn't see coming, the way you decide is either, can it be accomplished in less than 2 minutes? Yeah, do it, get it off the plate. Or does it require something else? You need to delegate it because you're not the best person to do it right now or ever, or you need to defer it. And so down at the bottom here are all these different ways that you can organize based off the actions you're taking up above. If we go on the no track, maybe you can toss it. That would be nice. Off your plate, out of your mind forever. Incubate it, return to it later. Or it's a reference. It's truly something that just goes in an archive. Another way to think about what I just shared with you is just 5 steps. You're capturing, meaning you're collecting what has your attention. You're clarifying. You have a process for what it means. Is it actionable? You organize. You put it where it belongs. You reflect. You review regularly. And you engage. You simply do. So this 4th hack is about streamlining your inbox. And to me, your email can become your personal assistant, meaning you can create certain folders, you can consolidate existing ones, and then you can customize what else you need to. So what you see here are examples of what I've done for my inbox based off some of David Allen's thinking. And the big kicker for me was, okay, sometimes I was going to the same message multiple times, or I was responding too quickly and losing track of what I said, or I was wondering what the status of something was that I put into motion using email. I loved when I rethought about, okay, instead of having folders that are organized by topic, I was going to organize by action. And so action is representing anything that needs to be attended to in 24 hours. I move it from the inbox over to there. Someday, it's like the nice to have, the dream, it's a next quarter initiative. It moves over into that bucket. That's not crowding up my immediate attention, but I don't lose it either. Reference has an asterisk I'll get back to in a minute. Learn later. Think of this as all those newsletters, all those podcast recommendations, the books, the different kinds of material that you want to absorb, but if you did it right now, you'd be late for something else. And that's where commutes, the train, the plane, the downtime that you book on your calendar for learning, that's when you can dive into there. And my personal favorite is waiting for. Before I had this, it was really difficult for me to find out, what did I ask that person 2 days ago, a week ago? What are they on the hook for? What's the status of that conversation? Waiting for was my blessing when I realized that anything that I wanted follow up on, that I was waiting for a response to, a reaction from, went in there. And the way I did that was I'd email the person, I'd BCC myself, now I had an e-trail, and it goes over into the waiting for folder. So last but not least, I mentioned reference is a star. I have to imagine I'm addressing a lot of you, and you already have your way of organizing. So if you're thinking, yeah, I want to change that, that's where maybe some of your existing folders, and they're organized by categories or by people you interact with, they can go as a subhead to that reference folder. Quick bonus here, more about Outlook. So if you're a Gmail user, I'm sorry, this is all geared towards the Microsoft product, but it's broken out into some shortcuts for PC. In the middle here are adding contacts from an email message. It's a really quick drag and drop, which is amazing because it populates some of the basic information you need. You don't have to spend time typing. And on the far right, adding context to a meeting invite, really helpful when you book something out 2 weeks and you want to remember what you most recently discussed. Again, drag and drop over to the little invite icon and boom, that's already in the notes section for you. Last but not least, for all of you who rely on scheduling to run your day, either you're doing it or maybe you've delegated someone else to do that for you, these two tools, one, Find Time, which is specifically Microsoft works with Outlook only, and Calendly, which does also work with Gmail and probably other email platforms as well, are quicker ways that sort of aggregate across folks' schedules and makes it really seamless in terms of deciding who's available, who's not, and then kind of putting the onus on the invitee to say, here's the time that works best for me, because it's only showing what's available for you. To get engagement into action, you must activate a routine where you're consistently spending time on the things that matter most. By now, I feel a little like a broken record. I keep saying matters most, but Joe and others here at Shift and of the books that I've mentioned, we all believe it. There are things that do matter, and there are certainly things that don't. So this fifth hack is what we call the hour of power here at Shift. And I love it. I've been doing it for years now. And what is it? It's 5 steps. So recommended that you do at the end of each week, not Monday morning if you can help it. But step 1, you brain dump. What didn't you get to the previous week? What follow-up do I have for the past week? What do I have coming up next week? And oh, by the way, what's happening over the next 2 weeks? That's the real kicker, is sometimes we're too immediate in our focus. Can we be a little bit more in our long-term plans? Step 2 is chunk it down. So once you've just accounted for, totally inventoried your life, figure out, okay, so this is all the stuff that's related to an internal team I'm on or an external team I'm on, or here's the personal stuff. Don't forget to represent what you need to do for you outside of work. And who are the people you need to connect with? That's a way to organize this list. Step 3, smart outcomes. So for me, I always want to be applying deadlines to everything, and sometimes I put the day before it's due just so that I have an increased level of urgency, but I also know I have a buffer. And this is all about estimating time as well. So do you think you're going to need 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes? Well, once you figure that out, step 4 is about scheduling it. So actually book the stuff you plan to do in the given week on your calendar, not just the meetings, but the creation stuff, the review time. And step 5, this is again, repetition, creating the habit, doing it on a weekly basis. I know some of my colleagues choose Friday afternoons, some of us choose the weekend, and it's whatever suits you best. But the real game changer is not waiting until Monday's already hit and you're already flooded with new information. Okay. What you do is more important than how you do it, and doing something well doesn't make it important, says Tim Ferriss, the author of the 4-Hour Work Week. You can see behind here that there's an image of the productivity planner. So that final hack I'm sharing with you today is plan for productivity. And you can see that 40% of time we spend at work is unproductive, according to calendar.com. Man, that's a drag. Wouldn't we like for all of our time to be as productive as possible, or at least decrease the interruptions so that percentage improves? Well, I'm here to share with you that there are ways to do that. It's called the Pomodoro Technique. It's part of the productivity planner, which you can purchase on intelligentchange.com. We were all gifted it at Shift a few years ago, and it's become a gift that's run rampant with our clients because we all really seem to love it. There's still some magic to having pen and paper. But this is how it breaks down. First, write down 3 to 5 things you plan to get done the next day. I know for me, that's a real challenge because if I'm being honest, there are a lot more things besides 5 that I would want to accomplish in a given work week or work day. But that's the method here. That's the true magic. It's being really selective that there are 5 things at most that you need to get done. Then rank them highest to lowest in priority. So real quick, if you have more than 5 things, put the other things on a separate list. Don't distract yourself by this all-encompassing. Really boil down your hour of power to your top 5. If you're not sure what a priority is, here's a helpful way to think about it. What's most important is usually what's most uncomfortable and probably something that is most procrastinated on. Another way I like to think about it is, if this doesn't get done today, will it keep me up at night? And if I can answer that, then I know what is the stack rank. Eliminate all distractions by setting a timer for 25 minutes and work on the first task, only that task. Now, some of you will find flow in 25 minutes, meaning you're on a roll, you don't want to interrupt yourself, you want to keep going. The Pomodoro Technique is saying, after that alarm goes off, take a 5-minute break. That's your reward, because that is going to reset your focus. It's going to give you renewed energy, and you'll come back even fresher for the next 25-minute increment. You can see that the structure is outlined here. Now, the thing is, you might not be done a large task in that 25 minutes, which is why you keep repeating and repeating until you've done it 4 times. And at that point, you deserve the 20-minute break. What's interesting about this, and Francesco Cirillo, who had the little tomato timer, which is how Pomodoro Technique got its name, found that he was actually able to combat his procrastination because he created his workload in bite-sized increments. The other thing I can offer you is just down at the bottom here, what's focus time, what's break. So what I really want you to hang on is, a break is not about taking your phone and going somewhere away from your desk to go check social media. It's still stimulating the mind. This is more about stretching, about bio breaks, about getting a fresh sip of water, about decompressing. And lastly, the thing too about Pomodoro Technique is it's giving us this different sense of awareness. How long do things actually take? And what you might find is your expectations need some adjustment. Maybe things take longer than you realize. Maybe they take shorter, and you can celebrate that. But the goal here is really to speed up the execution process. So with that, as we wrap up here, I share with you again those myths that we started off the webinar with. So on the top left, you might still fall prey to telling yourself these stories. But if that happens, I encourage you to go ahead and swap it with a new truth. So in the bottom right here, I've got 5 for you. The first being, doing less is better than doing more. This is all about focus, and that more doesn't equate to more value. Second, I was just talking about breaks, but truly they make you better. This is about seeing downtime not as lazy or selfish, but essential. 3, trade-offs are healthy choices. So recognize that sacrificing can improve the quality of what you're doing. Decide what you want to do well. Is it X or is it Y? It's not both. 4, everything I could do is not important. This goes back to what the Tim Ferriss quote was. It's about doing the right things and maximizing your efficacy. And 5, planning and organizing provide long-term rewards. So yes, I know some of us would prefer to just go with the flow and react in the moment, be really present, which is great. But the way you do that with not a lot of anxiety attached is if you've done the upfront homework of methodically planning things out, designing your life, your hour of power. So intentionality versus being constantly spontaneous and realizing you're missing things. We can be spontaneous, which is super fun, if we've done this other part first that allows us to still get what we want to get done and need to get done. So with that, I shared that there are assets that come with this webinar. Yes, it's the recording of the webinar and the deck, but it's also this leave behind around essentialism. So when we were talking about eliminating non-essentials earlier, which is only the third portion of Greg's book, this right here is a team activity that we've fully built out. It's over 50 slides long, and it has a facilitator's guide. So you can access all of this by going to that website, and I'll show you what it looks like real quick. So this is the lander page, shiftthework.com/essentialism. I recorded a short video to explain what this is all about. And again, all the assets are right here for you. And it's designed so that if you want to help your team think critically about how they use their time, if you want to improve how you think about time, how you execute against your tasks, if you want to create a space to really reflect and create opportunity for practical application, this is that exercise for you. We recommend it takes an hour, and there's definitely some dialogue in there, but this facilitator's guide goes every step of the way with you so that for each slide you know exactly what you can share and say, you have some data to back you up, and it can be a really impactful conversation. So with that, definitely check it out. And then if you haven't already, consider following us on social media. We really thank everyone who joined us today. It means a lot to us that you are part of the community. And if you want to plug in more ways, here are all the ones to access. We're at Shift the Work on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, if you want to reach out to the Shift team, we're here for you. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what about today's webinar really spoke to you and what you want to learn more about for next time. But as I mentioned earlier, some of those hacks in Outlook, yeah, we booked an hour, but I'm gifting you 5-6 minutes back. So go spend them, take a break, you deserve it, and thank you again for joining me today. Take care.